Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We have been discussing about Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. The knowledge pertains to specifically the knowledge of the self, which is the most important aspect of knowledge. And since the aim of yoga is self-realization, therefore knowledge of the self is very, very important aspect of the various branches of knowledge. Now, knowledge of the self means there are two kinds of self. One is the individual self or the soul, the spirit soul, and the other is the supreme soul, the supreme self, God. So different philosophers, they have different theories about the self. The non-Vedic philosophers, they have atheistic conclusions, whereas the Vedic philosophers, though they accept the Vedas, the famous 6 philosophers who are Vedic philosophers, they give conclusions, different conclusions, 6 different conclusions. The among the 6 philosophers, only Vyasadeva, who actually has given the Vedanta philosophy, gives the correct understanding of what is the conclusion of the entire Vedic literature. Vedanta, the conclusion. And Vyasadeva says that Sri Krishna is the absolute truth, the ultimate source, based on the Vedic literature. It is not some conclusion he has arrived at independent of what the Vedas describe. No. Whereas the other 5 philosophers, they come to so many different conclusions, like karma is the ultimate reality, or atom is the ultimate reality, or some material elements are the ultimate reality, like that. So many different philosophies are there. But one cannot ascertain simply by studying various scriptures or various books what is the ultimate reality or the absolute truth, or what is the self. Self-knowledge is best explained in the Bhagavad-Gita, because Bhagavad-Gita concerns self-knowledge, Brahma Vidya. So this Bhagavad-Gita is important not just because of self-knowledge only, but because Bhagavad-Gita describes the Supreme Self. Krishna gives us knowledge about himself in the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, this knowledge about Krishna or the Supreme Self is not possible to be understood except when explained by the Supreme Lord Himself. At the beginning of the creation, the Supreme Lord Krishna explained this knowledge to Lord Brahma. Later on, Brahma has explained the same knowledge to his sons and disciples, and in that way the knowledge is handed down in parampara, disciplic succession. So we have to hear or learn directly from the Supreme Lord or from his representative, who is a spiritual master in disciplic succession from the Lord, beginning from the Lord. Otherwise, there's no possibility anybody can understand or determine or come to a factual understanding of what is the self or what is the ultimate reality. It's not possible to know. Therefore, this yoga of knowledge is best understood by studying the Bhagavad-Gita. This is the conclusion we should come to based on the Bhagavad-Gita itself. So, in the Bhagavad-Gita, clearly it is explained that the individual soul is completely spiritual by nature, but the individual soul is a tiny part of the Supreme Soul, Krishna, and Krishna is incarnating. He is making so many different arrangements for rescuing us from this material bondage. Krishna, whenever he comes for delivering the living beings from this world. He wants us to go back to him in the spiritual world. That's the reason Krishna incarnates, the primary reason why Krishna incarnates. So therefore, this knowledge about the self or self-realization is possible for one who acquires this knowledge from the proper source, and merely by knowing this subject matter, it is not going to ultimately lead to self-realization, perfect or complete self-realization. For perfect realization, one requires to perform activities on the basis of this knowledge, self-knowledge. Just like if somebody knows I am spirit soul, I am not this body, that knowledge alone is insufficient for liberation. One has to act on the platform of this understanding that I am spirit soul, I am not the body, which means the activities of a person who is properly situated in knowledge will be completely spiritual activities, not material activities. So, what are those spiritual activities because of which one is able to ultimately get liberation from material bondage? Those spiritual activities are nothing but devotional service, activities of bhakti. So therefore, the conclusion is that if one wants ultimate liberation or one wants actual self-realization, one has to engage in devotional service. That is why it is said, Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. Any yoga system other than Bhakti Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. Yoga means Bhakti Yoga. And even this knowledge need not be separately cultivated or separately studied or separately learned if one is able to directly engage in devotional service. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, there is a very nice verse which says, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayad Ahitukam. This verse means one who is engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Lord Vasudeva or Krishna, such a person automatically and very quickly, without separate effort, is able to develop jnana and vairagya, spiritual knowledge and material detachment. Both are very easily attained without separate endeavor by a devotee who is engaged in devotional service to Lord Krishna. So, this Jnana Yoga is necessary for those who do not take up directly the process of devotional service. And in any case, the path of Jnana Yoga leads to the conclusion that I am spirit soul. The supreme absolute truth is the supreme spirit. The supreme absolute truth is the ultimate reality. And I have a relationship, I have a connection with that supreme absolute truth, supreme reality. And to establish that, the path of jnana leads to taking up meditation on the supreme self. That leads to, generally in the gradual progress on the path of yoga, it leads to Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is the third kind of yoga practice that is also described in the Bhagavad-Gita as Dhyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, the same thing, where one actually practices 8 different kinds of procedures for ultimately fixing up one's concentration through meditation on the Supreme Lord within the heart, who is the Krishna is the super soul within everyone's heart, and to focus one's attention entirely on the Supreme Lord within the heart. But that is not possible for everyone to directly again take up that. So one has to practice the preliminary procedures, beginning with some controlling the eating, sleeping, working, and then restraining from certain types of activities, engaging in some types of austerities, tapasya. So many different steps are there in this Ashtanga Yoga. So the Jnana Yoga progressively leads to Ashtanga Yoga, and then Ashtanga Yoga leads to Bhakti Yoga. But if somebody is fortunate to come in contact with a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord, one can directly begin Bhakti Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga is the culmination of all yoga systems. It is the ultimate yoga system which can directly connect us with the Supreme Lord Krishna without any need for endeavoring to perform pious activities or to perform sacrifices or to do any austerities of the Ashtanga Yoga or to study the scriptures according to the Jnana Yoga system. None of these things are separately to be endeavored in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. Now, some of the characteristics of this Jnana Yoga, spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge, is given in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. In brief, Krishna explains this transcendental knowledge or the spiritual understanding by properly cultivating knowledge. Krishna says that the characteristics of one who is situated in or has actually reached the perfection of knowledge is that one who is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every act is devoid of desire for sense gratification. As I said, it is not enough to have knowledge, it is important to act on that platform of understanding. So on the platform of understanding, if one is able to act, then such a person is properly situated in perfect knowledge. Now, what is one of the characteristics is that every action a person performs on the platform of perfect knowledge is devoid of desire for sense gratification. The Bhagavad-Gita explains in very simple terms that the cause of our bondage in this material world is simply because we desire sense enjoyment. The sense enjoyment is actually the greatest enemy, is the greatest enemy of the spirit soul. Therefore, to completely become free from these desires for sense gratification or sense enjoyment, one has to actually understand or cultivate knowledge that this sense enjoyment is not the real happiness that we are entitled to as spirit soul. It is simply some external enjoyment which is momentary, which is flickering, which is illusory, which is the source of so many other miseries in this world, like that. So that is explained in the Bhagavad Gita very clearly, that we are meant for spiritual happiness, the happiness of self-realization, or the happiness of devotional service, or the happiness of our relationship being re-established with the Supreme Lord Krishna, that kind of happiness, not the happiness of the senses, material senses, or the material mind, or the material intelligence being engaged in different ways in this material world. No, that is not the real source of happiness. That's not the real way of happiness. That is explained in the Bhagavad Gita very clearly. So therefore, Krishna is explaining in the 4th chapter that if a person's actions are free from the desire for sense enjoyment, then such a person is said to be situated in full knowledge, in perfect knowledge. And for such a person, all the reactions of all his actions are burnt away by the fire of perfect knowledge. Knowledge is, transcendental knowledge is so powerful, it can burn away all reactions. Then, some more characteristics are explained. Such a person who is situated in perfect understanding of transcendental knowledge or spiritual knowledge, he gives up all attachment to the results of his activities. Why? Because he understands that ultimately everyone and everything belongs to Krishna. The Supreme Lord is the proprietor and owner of everything. So, even whatever activities we perform, we are meant to perform all activities for his satisfaction, and he is the enjoyer of the results of our activities. The results belong to him. Therefore, a person who is truly situated in knowledge, he gives up all attachments to the results of his activities. He is always satisfied in any condition of life, because his goal is not to be happy in this world by some adjustment, but to actually become happy by re-establishing his relationship with Krishna and returning to Krishna's personal kingdom. Such a person, though engages in all kinds of activities, he never performs any activity for getting some enjoyable results. He never performs that kind of activity. And then, such a person, situated in perfect knowledge, he acts with his mind and intelligence perfectly controlled. This is another important characteristic of a person situated in knowledge. Generally, people are driven by the desires of the mind to do so many different things. Just like people say, I like to do something, I like to work in this way. Now, activities based on what we like to do or what our mind dictates is actually meant for bondage. On the other hand, if somebody controls their mind and intelligence and acts exactly according to the directions of the scriptures, the Vedic literature, or directions of the Supreme Lord Krishna, as he explains in the Bhagavad-Gita, performs all activities for the satisfaction and pleasure of the Supreme Lord. That's what we understood as sacrifice. Sacrifice means working for pleasing Vishnu or the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, Supreme Lord. So, such a way of performing activities is different from ordinarily people working according to their own desires, their own likes, their dictation of their own mind or intelligence. No. So it is important that people come to proper understanding of their self and perform activities with their mind and intelligence controlled, giving up all sense of proprietorship over one's own possessions. I may be in possession of so many things, but it is not mine. I am actually given that for the sake of engaging them in the service of the Supreme Lord, engaging them for pleasing the Supreme Lord. And such a person is not affected by any sinful reactions, never affected by any sinful reactions. And another characteristic is such a person is always satisfied with gain, whatever gain comes of its own accord. Yadruchalabha santushta. Because a person in perfect knowledge understands that Krishna is in control of everything. It is the Supreme Lord Krishna only awards the results of all activities of every person in this world. So if Krishna is awarding the result, then there is question of calculating gain or considering any particular outcome of some work as gain or loss. Whatever it is awarded by Krishna. Therefore, a truly knowledgeable person does not expect or demand any kind of specific result from any activity he performs. Though he does his duties with all responsibility. He is not irresponsible. He performs his duties very nicely. But then as regards the ultimate outcome of such activities, such a person is satisfied with whatever is awarded by Krishna. Such a person is also free from duality. That means a person in perfect knowledge does not do activities only if the conditions are all very favorable. Whether favorable or unfavorable conditions, duty has to be performed. One has to do one's duty under all circumstances. So, in that way, a person situated in knowledge is free from duality. Dualities are incidental: happiness and distress, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, something considered as favorable or unfavorable. And such a person has no enviousness towards anybody else. So, free from envy, vimatsaraha, dvandvatitaha is beyond duality, is vimatsaraha, is free from envy. Because one is free from envy, one becomes very, very peaceful within the heart. Envious people are always disturbed in the mind, always disturbed in the mind. Those who are not envious of anyone, such persons are always peaceful in the mind. Then such a person, again Krishna explains, the perfection of this knowledge is such a person is never entangled in any material activities. So in this way, a person who is situated in perfect knowledge gradually progresses to come to the platform of performing activities in Krishna consciousness or devotional service. Gradually progresses. Of course, one can directly accept the path of devotional service and directly engage in devotional service, but that is for those who are fortunate to come in contact with a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. If somebody is not able to contact a pure devotee, then they have to gradually progress, and it takes a lot of time. In the 7th chapter, Krishna explains, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. After many, many millions of lifetimes of cultivation of knowledge, one becomes perfect in understanding. Jnanavan. Jnanavan means is having perfect understanding of the spiritual reality. Self-knowledge is perfectly cultured. Such a person, Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate, such a person ultimately surrenders to Krishna after becoming fully situated in transcendental knowledge. And what is that surrender characterized by? Vasudeva Sarvamiti. He realizes that ultimately Supreme Lord Vasudeva or Krishna is the cause of all causes, is the ultimate cause of everything. Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Samahatma, such a person is a great soul. Sudurlabha is very rarely seen. Such a great soul is rarely able to come to this perfection of knowledge of surrendering to Krishna. So surrender to Krishna means accepts devotional service. That's all. So ultimately all yoga systems lead to devotional service only. But a fortunate person who is able to cultivate knowledge in such a way that he comes to the perfection of knowledge, of reaching the pinnacle of spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge of knowing Krishna, then simply such a person surrenders to Krishna. So I will stop here. Tomorrow we will begin with understanding of Ashtanga Yoga, or the third yoga system, Dhyana Yoga. I'll take some questions. Some questions from yesterday. Does Nishkama Karma Yoga have any separate rituals? Sakama Karma Yoga has Karma Kanda, Jnana Yoga has Jnana Kanda, and Ashtanga Yoga is meditational process. What about Nishkama Karma Yoga? Nishkama Karma Yoga is Karma Yoga only. The difference is not in the procedure. The difference is only in the goal. The goal of Sakama Karma Yoga is some particular material benefit, whereas Nishkama Karma Yoga aims at no material benefit, but instead we want self-realization. That is the difference between Nishkama Karma Yoga and Sakama Karma Yoga. Not in the procedure or the process, but in the result or the goal of such yoga practice. Next question. Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-Gita as it is, complete audio set, is available online as an audio book, but read by a common person. Could I continue hearing this while commuting? Yes, you can definitely hear the audio book while commuting. That's very good utilization of the time. Kindly explain, next question. Kindly explain how to think of Krishna always, how to worship Krishna always, how to be a devotee of Krishna always. How to think of Krishna always is explained by Srila Prabhupada in the beginning of the Bhagavad-Gita by constantly engaging in chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Constant chanting of the holy name of the Supreme Lord is the way to think of Krishna always in this particular age of Kali Yuga. How to worship Krishna always? To always worship Krishna is the same procedure, the same process. Constantly chant Hare Krishna. Actually, worship of Krishna is best done by chanting Hare Krishna. And in this way, you can always be a devotee of Krishna also. Somebody who is always engaged in chanting Hare Krishna is a devotee of Krishna. Next question. How can a common person know whether his or her work is satisfying Krishna or not? Good question. In order to know whether my work is performed satisfactorily for the Supreme Lord, which is the basis of yajna or sacrifice, or even the basis of karma yoga, to do any work for satisfaction of Krishna, one has to actually, first of all, agree to follow Krishna's instructions or directions as given in the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, in addition to that, one also has to work under the guidance of Krishna's representative, the spiritual master. So for us, the spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, is our guide for actually performing different activities, at least in devotional service. So we follow Prabhupada's instructions, how to specifically follow Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad-Gita. Just like Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, think of me always. So Prabhupada says to think of Krishna always, you have to chant always Hare Krishna. So therefore, you follow Prabhupada's instructions. And if you're following Prabhupada's instructions, the way Prabhupada is instructed, that is satisfying to Krishna. In the one of the prayers to the spiritual master, it is said, Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado. If you satisfy the spiritual master, then you are able to satisfy Krishna. Now, how does one satisfy the spiritual master? By following his instructions the way he has instructed. So that's why Prabhupada has established this institution called International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, or Hare Krishna movement or Krishna Consciousness movement. So this movement is specifically giving association of devotees learn how to practice the instructions given by Prabhupada in a practical way. In Kali Yuga, finding a qualified Brahmana is not possible. Then where is the possibility of someone finding a true spiritual master who is in disciplic succession? That's why it is said that we have Prabhupada as the true spiritual master in disciplic succession. He is not physically present, but he has given us a system by which we can actually accept him as spiritual master and follow his instructions. The most important aspect of accepting a spiritual master is to take his instructions and follow them in the association of other like-minded practitioners or devotees who are following Srila Prabhupada. Then next question. Devotional service will automatically reveal the transcendental knowledge in the heart of a devotee. Then why does a devotee try to get that knowledge from the books? The books are meant to actually guide us in the practice itself. The books are meant to give us conviction in the understanding of the practice of devotional service. So therefore, books are also important. For somebody who is not able to read, somebody who is not literate, for them the practices are sufficient. But somebody is literate, then it is very important to study such books. Anyway, people who are literate read so many other kinds of books. What is the use of reading all those other kinds of books, except for getting some livelihood, earning some livelihood? Other than that, those other types of knowledge are useless. So some limited use will be there of other kinds of books or other kinds of knowledge. But this knowledge is very, very valuable. So if you can read such books and also augment your practice, because revealing transcendental knowledge in the heart is going to take time. Whereas from the books, you can immediately get the understanding of the spiritual truths. So that's why it's also important. That's why Prabhupada has written books, so that we can read and we can get that knowledge and have that understanding. Next question. If chanting 16 rounds comes under Sankirtan Yajna, is chanting 16 rounds comes under Sankirtan Yajna? Yes, it is Sankirtan Yajna. If not, then should devotees spend more time in Sankirtan than chanting? Okay, there are two kinds of chanting. One is the japa, other one is the kirtana. So, japa is where one chants and hears by oneself, whatever one has chanted. Whereas kirtana is, I chant, then you hear, then you chant, I hear. That way. It is generally done in a group. So both are recommended to be done, but the first priority is the japa, which individually everybody has to do 16 rounds of japa, and the next priority is the kirtana. Both have to be performed, but the first priority is always for japa. Krishna Prasadam makes us free from sinful reaction, and why does a sadhaka devotee suffer? This has been explained many times that prasadam frees us from sinful reaction. It takes time, because for us to give up our old habits is not possible instantaneously. So, till the habits are completely changed from old habits to new practices in devotional service, till then some residual reactions will be there. And these reactions also are not going to be severe. They're going to be reduced by the mercy of Krishna. The intensity of such reactions are reduced by the mercy of Krishna for devotees. So devotees need not worry about residual reactions. They'll gradually vanish. I'll stop here. Thank you. Hare Krishna.